All right, everybody. I've seen it. I've heard enough, and I'm going to say it. Now, for those Browns fans who don't know who I am, my name is Zenny Abraham. I'm CEO of Zenny 62 Media. I've covered the NFL going all the way back to when I was the first to cover the NFL draft, making a YouTube video in 2006, and before that, an internet account in 2005. I've covered 20 straight NFL drafts. I have covered owners' meetings. I've seen a lot of football, been a football strategy fan since, oh gosh, I would say about 15 years old. Blah, blah, blah. I've seen enough to do something I have never done in my entire history, and that is to call for a head coach to be fired before before the first game in the NFL regular season he's scheduled to coach, before he hits that field. And I'm calling for Todd Monken, the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, to be fired. And here's why. I don't want to go through, and I know Browns fans don't want to go through a season like they had with Kevin Stefanski, where he started off with Deshaun Watson. Deshaun, if I may, the fans were starting off with Deshaun Watson. He didn't play well. They had Jameis Winston, who was worlds better than Watson, but they had to fool around. They let Watson get injured. Then they had, instead of putting Winston in, they had another backup. That was Dorian Thompson-Robinson. He threw interceptions. He got injured. And then they brought in Jameis Winston. And under Jameis Winston, the Browns lit it up. The Browns' defense was the problem. Everybody knew it. But no one wanted to pay attention to that fact and just say, hey, look, start Jameis and work on the defense. They blamed Jameis, even though he had some of the most incredible games, not just in that season, but in NFL history. He made history. So now we have Shedeur Sanders, who the year that Jameis Winston was tearing up the playing fields and, putting his snow game into history. Remember when he beat the Pittsburgh Steelers on a Thursday night in the snow in an amazing and amazingly scintillating Thursday night football game? Remember that? Okay? That was incredible. All right? While he was doing that, Shedeur Sanders was tearing up the playing fields in Colorado, and everybody who watched college football expected Shedeur to be the number one pick. Thank you, Mom. You and I both know, my mom knows, everybody knows that didn't happen. Instead, Cam Ward was picked, and Shedeur was left to fall. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fifth round. Why? Oh, he's cocky. He believes in himself. All the other garbage because he had NIL, name, image, and likeness money. In other words, he was a black man who had a good reason to be confident in himself, which in this day and age still scares a lot of people, which in and of itself, folks, is absolutely psychotic. But I digress. The simple fact of the matter is that Shedeur is a fast learner. He played in 6 different offenses through his college career in the NFL. And he's done it very well. So here comes Todd Monken, who I had some hope for, but I held my powder rather than say, yeah, great hire. I was set to say, yeah, Todd's good, but I thought about the things I didn't like about Todd. What I didn't like was how Todd Monken treated Jameis Winston. When something would go on later, Jameis Winston when he was having his problems with the Buccaneers, Todd Monken got on the bandwagon and talked about his interceptions. To which I remember that I blamed Todd for his offensive design in creating the interceptions that Jameis threw. I even found Todd on Twitter and I said, why don't you roll out Monken this, why don't you roll out Jameis Winston this way? Call one of those. He was the offensive coordinator in those years. with the Bucks. And he said, "Oh yeah, good idea. Yeah, well, do it." Then when he did do it, his rollout was of such terrible design it got Jameis killed. But he listened, okay, but still, too little, too late. And then when he was offensive coordinator for the Ravens, Monken wasted little or no time in throwing Lamar Jackson under the bus, being critical of him. Give me a break. All right? Did Todd do great things with Lamar Jackson? Yes, he did. Did he do great things in college at the University of Georgia when he was offensive coordinator, producing a number of great quarterbacks like Stetson Bennett? Yes, he did. But just because you come up with a creative play here and there doesn't mean you have what it takes to be a great head coach. A great head coach means that you have the good sense and judgment, not just to know what you're looking at, but also to trust what others see. And in this instance, the eye test that my mother employed and others employed and Browns fans employed said that Shedeur Sanders is a better quarterback than Deshaun Watson. The statistics said it. That's right. Shedeur Sanders had an incredible completion percentage up there, 68%. Deshaun Watson is down below, okay? Way down. In the 50s, 58%, in there. The overall passer rating, 65 for Shedeur Sanders, 61 for Watson in 2 games. In Watson's poor first game, you know what I saw? I saw a fix that I never forgot because the Browns have done it before. When Dillon Gabriel was drafted and in the 3rd round, and then the Browns turned around and took Shedeur Sanders in the 5th, they played with Shedeur's head. They put Dillon Gabriel in an easy-to-run offense that included wide receiver screens, standard screens, and short passes. His average throw was just over 6 yards. That's it. And that was noted by everybody, okay? When they put Watson in, they had him throw deep. In other words, they put more pressure on the offensive line, made it more likely that Shedeur was going to get sacked, and that's precisely what happened. They engineered a scenario to make him look bad. They engineered a place where he could never quite get good footing. It was either the scheme was not favorable to making him, give a better passer percentage, or he was playing with lesser, people who, after the NFL drafted into the preseason, you all know some of them would never see the NFL football field again. But there they were, blocking for Shedeur and missing their blocks and getting Shedeur killed. This happened a lot. A lot. So you'd think that with Todd Monken, the situation would be better, given that Todd Monken came out saying all the right things about Sanders, acting like they were buddy-buddy, acting like he was the favorite guy for him. Set him up. And what does he do? When it matters the most, he knocks him down. Literally, he knocks him down, all right? Knocks him down. And so he says this. He says, hey, this is what Todd says, I'm not anyone if I have to let somebody else, make a decision for me. In other words, he's not going to trust anybody. Well, let's think about that. How did Dak Prescott become so popular? I don't know if anyone remembers, but in Dak Prescott's rookie season, he rose to the top of NFL eyeballs with an incredible performance in preseason against the Los Angeles Rams at the Coliseum in Los Angeles. Dak Prescott literally couldn't miss. Before him, Tony Romo captured the audience attention with a similar performance. Not quite as accurate, but every bit as effective. And this happened over several years. In other words, it didn't take one preseason game. It took a little bit longer before Tony Romo got his chance. But it was the audience that said to the coaches, put this guy in. Let him start. Similarly, today, everyone has said, put this guy, Deshaun Watson, out behind Shedeur Sanders. It's Sanders' time to shine because he can shine. So in the first game, what did they do? Okay, what did they do? What did they do? What did they do? They put, again, this is Todd Monken, put Shedeur Sanders in a situation where, guess what? The plays he ran were the more difficult variety. Go back, play action. Against players, by the way, that are on the lower rung of the totem pole, or rather with players blocking for him, they're on the lower rung of the totem pole. So he gets rushed by defenders, they get close, they bat his ball. To be expected. But also, they didn't call a single wide receiver screen. Not a single screen. Not a rollout short pass. How about a quarterback draw? They didn't give Sanders a chance. Everything was, well, we're going to put him in a pro set and have him go back 7 steps. What? Why? 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 So the second game, what did they do? He started the first half. Played that similar offense that was more, aggressive, 80s style San Diego Charger passing. Note that I didn't say Bill Walsh passing. I said San Diego style Chargers, right? Don Coryell style, all right? That requires blocking and, you're more likely to get hit. You're going to get rushed, okay? Okay? And what happened? He was 8 for 8 and performed exceptionally well. And by all accounts, he should have been anointed the starter. But what does Todd do? Todd picks Deshaun Watson. And this is after Deshaun Watson lambasted the crowd for booing him. Look, Watson wasn't booed just because of the off-field incidents that I came to his defense about. I pointed out to anybody who would care to listen, and many who wouldn't, that famed class action lawyer Tony Busby set up Deshaun Watson with fake victims. You heard what I said, fake victims. Okay? Fake victims with a capital F, A, K, E. Fake victims, all right? Fake victims. They claimed 21 victims. I wrote about it on OaklandNewsNowBlog.com. Fake victims. You heard me. When it whittled down from 21 to 4, of the 4, only 2 were like maybe, and they were all like, nothing. Why did it all happen? Because Deshaun Watson opened his trap and said that he demanded the Texans to let him have say in the head coach hiring. Really, there's nothing wrong with that. But he said, if you don't do that, I want to walk. And it was after they put $127 million in his pocket. So they're thinking, wow, he's going to do that after we paid him all that money just because he doesn't have enough control. So you know what they did? The Texans, they hired Tony Busby to make Deshaun Watson look bad using a dalliance, maybe. Nobody knows, but no real proof, with a couple of massage therapists and then taking it to make it look like it was a lot of them in a city, Houston, known for massage therapists that give a little extra. Yeah. Some are reported to be couched within, at that time, the 102 massage parlors that were believed to be also places where prostitution practices were done. Okay? That's what the Texans did to Watson, because Watson dare open his mouth. So what does Watson do? Because he's getting booed, knowing why he's getting booed, instead of showing that he's grown emotionally and said, well, you know what? I can see why they're booing. I like Shedeur's too, but I got to play the game. You know, that would have gotten some laughs from people. Maybe even converted some people. But no, what does he do? He torches the Browns fans. I heard it. You heard it. I think Mom heard it. Mom, did you hear it? He torched the Browns fans. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So here we are. Hold that thought for one moment, please. Are you okay? Are you okay? You just sleeping? You want to put your feet up? Okay, hold on. Here you go. You want some water? Okay. Does that feel better? Okay. All right. Okay, folks. I had to excuse myself. My mom needed a hand. All right. And so, as I was saying, you okay now? Okay. She's had a long, long day, and she's the best cook in the world. As I was saying, Deshaun, what did he do? He torched the Browns fans. He made enemies of them. Essentially, Deshaun Watson did the same thing in Cleveland that has stirred up the Browns fans that he did in Texans that angered the Texans brass. He can't quite just, keep his mouth shut. All right? So rather than say, hey, we need to sit this guy down. He's still a little rough around the edges. And we got a guy, Shedeur, who really deserves a chance. Because Todd Monken doesn't want to listen to anybody. Because Todd wants to, at 60 years old, still prove that he's the man. He has to let you know he's the man by making a dumbass mistake. And I said it just like that. Hey, look, if the Browns turn around and beat the Jacksonville Jaguars, which ain't happening, let me know. Because I did say it ain't happening. If Todd Monken proves he is that coach, which I don't believe he is, okay, I will be the first to tell you, maybe, that I was wrong. But I'm not going to be wrong. Because Todd has to understand that this is the modern age. And there's something called a Delphi technique, where a number of people can form an opinion, and as long as it doesn't have to do with racism or anything that's bad, it has to do with football and, hey, who's most effective and who they most enjoy watching, you go with the crowd. You don't go against the crowd as if you're going to prove that you know more than they do. Because in the computer age, you don't. What you do is go data gathering, try to see how they see it, combine it with what you see and what you need, and go forward. Football can be made complicated, but on its surface, it is not. Now, let me take some of your comments on this. Someone says, you have not learned anything. I learned more than you. Stefanski isn't Todd Monken. How do you know? This is Todd Monken's first time at bat as a head coach. All he's ever done has been offensive coordinator. You have no idea what to expect from Todd Monken. I'm saying I was ready to give him high hopes, a chance, right? But I remember some things he didn't like, and the way he treats his quarterbacks in that I know better than you sort of way, that doesn't work, by the way, when he does that, reared its head again. All right? Now you say apples and oranges. And I would say, you're wrong. Then this other person says, David FX says, Browns should just send Watson home. Can't believe he was named starter after what he said Saturday. Thank you. Thank you. I couldn't believe he was named starter in the wake of what Shedeur did on the field. Everybody was talking about it. Everyone. David says, watch the throws Shedeur makes downfield. Watson can't do that. You know, Watson used to be able to do that. And maybe, you know, if I had to get it in try to get in the Todd's head and remember the times that, you know, I thought Todd was kind of like, you know, okay, as opposed to like, eh. He believes he can with scheme, get a great performance out of Watson. My question to him is, are you going to make absolutely certain that Deshaun's going to study the playbook? Just saying. Just saying. Okay? Just saying. All right? The younger Deshaun Watson with the Texans, boy, my mom loved him. I remember when we were on an overlay on the way to Las Vegas, we saw the Houston Texans playoff game. That was a lot of fun. And we were both rooting for Watson. So this isn't, I don't want to be anti-Deshaun. That's not the point. I'm not being anti-Deshaun. I'm being anti the situation. All right? Shedeur should start. And the way Todd's going as head coach, he shouldn't be the head coach. So yeah, I'm calling it. Fire him. Hey, why not? Mike Tomlin will be the Cleveland Browns head coach in 2027. I think that's a great idea. Absolutely. Mike Tomlin would start Shedeur Sanders. Mike Tomlin would not, and I know we're talking about a guy that gave us Vontaze Burfict and Antonio Brown and others. Okay, but look, he also gave us a number of great quarterbacks when he was Steelers head coach. 19 years, never a losing season. Why wouldn't the Browns bring him in? Or maybe it's that, you know, behind the scenes, Mike took one look at the Browns management and said, I'll pass. And I don't mean quarterback. I'll enter the broadcast booth and I'll make a blank ton of money. And I'll enjoy every second of it because you know he's going to. Mike Tomlin's going to be outstanding. I think this is a great one. Remember this. He may very well be right. Because Mike Tomlin has got to be somebody's first hire as soon as possible. My bet is that Mike Tomlin gets a job faster than John Gruden does this time that John Gruden's back in the broadcast booth. Nothing gets my boy John Gruden. Yeah, I know him. But Mike Tomlin, you don't see Mike Tomlin people every day. That guy gets a job, right? So remember what Anthony said here, because I think this could happen. All right. Now, in closing, I remind you this. If the Browns shock the world and beat the Jaguars, I will make a video that says, I'm sorry, Todd, I was wrong. I know it's not happening. All right. David FX says, yeah, Watson's injuries have really hurt his ability. He was amazing with the Texans. Yeah, he could run like the wind. He played in an excellent ball control passing offense that featured I formation play action passes and some of the best play action plays I've ever seen designed out of an I formation with the Texans. And the question is, the offensive coordinator, I think it was R.C. Slocum. Yeah, didn't have to look that one up. It was R.C. Slocum who was the offensive coordinator then. R.C., great job. And I want to make sure, though, because something's saying to me, Zenny, I'm not sure that was R.C. Slocum. He got the wrong R. So I want to make sure. At any rate, because I'm going to type real quick, Texans. Oops. Offensive coordinator. Oh, this is taking too long. Texans offensive coordinator. I'll do it another way. That's not working. Okay. So my point is that that I've got to get this right. Something just got to get right, folks. All right. Texans offensive coordinator, then Deshaun Watson. Okay. All right. It was Tim Kelly. I stand corrected. It was Tim Kelly. I'm glad I did that. It was Tim Kelly who was the offensive coordinator for the Texans. It wasn't R.C. Slocum. It was Tim Kelly. Okay? So Tim Kelly was the one who really produced these excellent offensive attacks. Now, David says, do you think Watson has respect in the locker room? You've been around the NFL for a long time, so I figure you have an idea. I think he has a great deal of respect among players who know him. And I say that because when I was writing about him in that whole matter of the scandal, I got videos and pictures of parties and fundraisers he held where there were scores of players giving him dap, commiserating, just really giving him major league respect. And many of those players are still playing in the NFL today. All right. And so you can bet that a guy who has received a contract of $265 million and then on top of that still has sponsors, you can bet that person has helped some of those players monetarily too. That buys a lot. That buys some currency. So it's not a question of whether or not the players like or dislike Deshaun Watson. The players also know that Deshaun Watson was set up. In other words, they know that he's not the kind of guy that's going to go out and actually, behave toward women the way he's been painted as having done. They all know what I know, that Tony Busby created a fake lawsuit. Tony, who is acquainted with me, and vice versa, Busby, who is an outstanding class action lawyer, who we almost hired for a situation opposite the federal government during the PPP loan issue, okay? Who I would have hired, I wanted to hire in a heartbeat, and I told him. But Tony knows that I have no love, because I talked about it on my video blog. I have no love for what he tried to do and did to Deshaun Watson at the hands of his hirers, the Houston Texans. Yes, the Houston Texans hired Tony Busby, who lives just down the street and up the block and over away from walking distance from Cal McNair, the son of Bob McNair, the founder and owner, rest in peace, he's a great person to me, of the Houston Texans. You can see my video interviews with Bob McNair right here on Zenny62 YouTube. I haven't gotten a hold of Cal yet, but that'll change. My point is this. It's very simply that Watson has the respect of the locker room. That's not the issue. Everyone knows that Watson has been wronged by the NFL and by the hands specifically of Cal McNair and the Houston Texans that called for Tony Busby and hired Tony Busby to do what he did. Everyone knows those stories weren't true. And the people who showed up, who were supposedly the victims, the ones who knew best of all because they really had no story. Now, did they? No, they didn't. It was sad. It was sad. And so David says, I think Sanders has looked better than Cam Ward in preseason. Oh, it's another one, isn't it? I thought Shedeur was the best quarterback in last year's draft. He was. He certainly was. And what I don't like is this NFL thing that some teams do, especially when they have an African-American quarterback who's the center of attention, is they try to make that quarterback look bad in creative ways. Either they put you in an offense they know you're not well suited to. Well, let's take classic example. The man who I had high hopes for when they drafted him. And that happens to be, Baylor's great Robert Griffin III, RG3, whose father I had the pleasure of interviewing too at the NFL draft in New York City. Robert Griffin III, the first impression I had of him, whipper smart dude. And I say this because, to be candid, folks, I went through a generation that started with teams drafting African-American players who went through the classic college mill of the football school, getting a degree that wasn't really all that advanced, coming out and making their mark in the NFL and then going off and you don't hear from them again. But something changed in 2010. It was marked by people like Prince Amukamara and Nadakam Suh. Nadakam Suh, one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. Fantastic defensive tackle. Created a great living for himself. Focused on engineering after football. Same with Prince Amukamara. And if it wasn't those two, there were African Americans who were defensive backs, but also getting advanced degrees in medicine, and so on and so on. My point is, the NFL and the coaches didn't really know what to do with the smart black player who could do something else other than football, but it just so happened they did football well. And you could see how different even the press treated them. Didn't quite know what to say to them. Knew that they had a different type of person to deal with. And yet, they came in a situation where if you were a white player and you were drafted and it was your first meeting with the NFL draft press, if you had an incident in college that made, well, you got arrested, there were no questions from the mostly white press. Nothing. I changed that because I had it. And I remember the great offensive tackle from Michigan that originally that eventually played with the Titans, was said that in college had a terrible temper on the level of such players like Conrad Dobler or Richie Incognito. Okay, Richie Incognito. Remember that name, Richie Incognito? All right, yeah, Richie Incognito. And this great Michigan offensive tackle, drafted by the Texans, okay? After the Ohio State-Michigan game, okay? Decided that he was going to beat up a couple of players because he was pissed off they lost. He beat them pretty good, too, all right? He beat them pretty doggone good. He shouldn't have done it, but he did. Wound up in jail for a little bit, paid his fine, and then I met him at the NFL draft. That guy is Taylor Lewan. All right? Had a great fun talk at NFL Play 60 with Taylor Lewan and his agent. But when it came up for him to come out and meet the press, did anybody ask Mr. Lewan about how he beat up two Michigan students, Ohio State students, excuse me? Did anybody ask Taylor Lewan about that? Did anyone ask Taylor Lewan about claims that he had a temper on this side of Richie Incognito? Yeah, me. I did. Okay? I did. Because I had it. I had it. So Richie, hey, his video's here on Zenny 62. I'll show you another time. Richie said, "Oh, you think that's a funny question, huh?" And I said, he goes, "Nice tie." He's talking about his nice tie. I said, "Yeah, bald head too." All right. I didn't make it any better. Because what I was saying is, hey, look, just because you're white doesn't mean you can get away with murder and have your image shine when, sure enough, as what happened to the player that came behind him occurred, if you're a black player, you get arrested, they ask you about it. Because that's precisely what happened to this person who was a cornerback drafted by the San Diego Chargers. And he came out. There were few press to talk to him except me and a few others. Right after Mr. Lewan. He was asked the first thing about his arrest and little else. And he acted like and looked like he had been hit by a truck. I went up to him and I said, "Young man, you don't have to answer those questions. The man before you was in a great deal of trouble and they didn't ask him anything except what I did. Take a lesson." He said, "Thanks, I appreciate that," because he didn't know what to do with it. No one should have to go through that. No one. And so finally we're in an era, thank God, we have a more level playing field in terms of how people are treated. Still some improvement here, but a dramatic improvement over what I've seen over the years. And look, I love the National Football League and always will. But you got to tell the truth about what you see. And what the truth is there but the one you see, right? So now we have players that are not afraid, who are black, to be smart. Shedeur Sanders is one of them. And what he's catching is remnants of that past NFL behavior that just don't quite like the black player that's smart and outspoken. There are ways to do it. There are ways to do it. But just because he's that doesn't mean that you cut off your own nose in spite of your face. And that's what the Browns did and bring in Todd Monken and allowing Monken to start Deshaun Watson over Shedeur Sanders. Now, in fairness to the Browns would say, we're paying him $256 million. I would say, you know what? Make your money back. The best way to make your money back is keep that guy on the bench and let Sanders play for a change. That's the best way. That's the best way. That's the best way. Oh, wow. I had no idea Lewan did that. Yeah, Taylor Lewan did that. Yes. Taylor Lewan did that. Yeah, he sure did. And I should find, since I have you on here, I should find the video and show you. And I will, since I went this far, right? Why not? Bear with me for a moment. It won't take long. This won't hurt. And so while I'm waiting for that to come up, let me get your other statement. It says, do you think Henry Ruggs will get another chance to play? Should he? I think, given what he did, my sad answer after having thought about this a long, long time is no, I don't. Because it would be one thing if he got into an accident like that, and maybe the young lady was injured. Maybe if for a few years she couldn't walk, but then regained her body and everything else. But that didn't happen. She died. Okay? I mean, thank God he's not in jail for life. Okay? Can he still work in the NFL as far as I'm concerned? Yeah. Would I be very angry if he got a job? No, I wouldn't. It was an accident, but he was speeding. It was the nature of what he did. As far as I'm concerned, Henry Ruggs' punishment should be making commercials to remind everybody of what he did and talk about the dangers of drinking driving for the rest of his life. That's just desserts. That's horrible. That's horrible. I mean, they say you get one chance at this, you know? You go out and one thing I can say is I've had a lot of bad luck, but I'll tell you this. It wasn't because I was trying to have bad luck, okay? Well, maybe there was that one time. I remember when I was trying to bring the Super Bowl to Oakland. This was in the year 2000. Then San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown left me with the impression that I had his help. The city of San Francisco's help. They would endorse the Super Bowl bid and help us with the hotels. Yes, I thought all that, right? So I went out and I went bar hopping. I went to bed late, like 1:30 in the morning, but I was at Merchant's Bar. If you're in Oakland, Merchant's is Jack London Square. I had rum and Coke. It was one of my drinks of choice back then, and got into my 1998 black Ford Probe and drove home. And then I woke up. I'd fallen asleep at the wheel. And when I woke up, I thought, wow, I need to turn. So I turned. And next thing I knew, I was headed the wrong way up the freeway ramp of the Nimitz Freeway. I thought, a car was coming at me. I thought, how do I get out of this? What I should have done is I should have calmly stopped the car and put the car in reverse. But, I woke up. I was out. I had worked all day, ate, had a little too few. I've never went out with the intention of getting drunk. Okay. So I wasn't like, I wasn't falling down drunk. I've never been that. But I do get sleepy when I have cocktails. That's why I don't have anymore. I get tea. I have coffee. Even if I go to a bar, I have coffee. Not even Irish coffee anymore. I have coffee. I fall asleep easily. So I crashed my car. Lucky to be alive. That was my lesson. And that's why I know how easy it is, but people, you know, I shouldn't have been by myself. I was I was. We all make our mistakes. My punishment, well, this is my life. I worked on the Super Bowl issue. I was called Mr. Super Bowl. So after taking me to Alta Bates Hospital and having my blood drawn and everything, see if I was okay, and having CT scan and all that, I was fine. They put me to the jail, and the jailer looked down on me. This is after 15 minutes, folks. He goes, "Wait a minute, haven't I seen you before?" I said, "I don't know. What do you mean?" He goes, You're Mr. Super Bowl." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Don't worry, we'll get you out of here." He got me out 45 minutes later. So I wasn't there for long. What was my punishment other than, that? I had to do court watch, which is where you go and you actually watch court. So I did one day, and then went back the second day. I was talking to the judge and about working for the mayor, the Raiders, and that sort of thing. And I told him I promised him I'd get him a copy of the Raiders lawsuit that the city of Oakland was involved in. I got a big, thick thing. Next day, I got in there, gave it to him. So I'm sitting in the bailiff box. Judge comes in, gets up to the mic. First thing he says is, "Al Davis is a crook." Bailiff said, "You can go." That was it. Lucky, okay? You don't play with that kind of luck. Thank you. You don't play with that kind of luck. And that's why I say Henry Ruggs, I don't think playing in the NFL should be his desire. I think working for the NFL as a spokesperson should be. But I think he should do something to honor that woman he killed accidentally. Because I know that family, the family of that young lady, would really appreciate it. So there's my answer to your question. It says, "That's a wild story. I'm glad you were okay and no one was hurt." Yeah, me too. But there ought to be a movie about what I did to get Oakland to one of 3 finalists for the right to host the 2005 Super Bowl. Because encapsulated within that story, which I'll tell another time, is the reason why Oakland doesn't have professional sports anymore today. And the bottom line, folks, is because you have too many people in Oakland who don't see Oakland as being able to have anything great or nice. That wasn't always the case, but it sort of evolved over the years. Starting arguably in the late 70s, when we didn't refurbish the Coliseum for the Raiders. And if we had given Al Davis the seats he wanted, he would have still been in Oakland rather than bolting down to LA. But in those days, the Raiders didn't even have Pete Rozelle on their side. So Lionel Wilson, the mayor of Oakland at the time in 79, had reason to think that, hey, this wasn't going to go for the Raiders. The Raiders weren't going to move. But Al Davis had different ideas. That's why they called him the Maverick. But the kind of Oakland that existed then, in terms of its people and its electorate, said, we're going to get the Raiders back, and did. That was the Oakland I know. But the Oakland that existed when I tried to bring the Super Bowl in, it had parts of what it is today. A guy that was a groundskeeper near where I worked at the large administration building would say to me, he said this to me 5 times in a row, "You're working on the Super Bowl, you're never going to get it. You're never going to get it." This is a guy who's getting paid by the city of Oakland, right? On the 6th day, I got tired. And I went Bobcat Goldthwait on him. Bobcat Goldthwait is a comedian that's known for say it. And I made the groundskeeper say, "Super Bowl, Oakland, Super Bowl, Oakland." I made him cheer it out with me. And I didn't threaten him physically or anything. I just came at him with the energy he wasn't ready for, and he loved it. So he said, after that, he said, every time I was on the way to work, Super Bowl Oakland. And that's what I wanted to hear. Okay. I can tell you more stories about that. But back to my point. The one I've learned about the NFL is encapsulated in what I learned when we tried to bring the Super Bowl to the NFL. Jacksonville got it. Why? Because as Jim Steig, who was then the Mr. Super Bowl for the NFL Senior Vice President for special events, he said Jacksonville was aggressive. They had no business getting a Super Bowl game, but they didn't believe it. They just kept trying. They got it on the third time. That's what happened. The NFL rewards, to this day, smart, aggressive people in all positions. It doesn't matter. That's how Roger Goodell got in. Marketing major, fresh out of college, knew to take the right jobs and meet the right people. So eventually, by the time I became aware of Roger Goodell, and I'll tell you when that was, that and the fact that he was going to become a commissioner was because Allo Casal, executive assistant of the Oakland Raiders, Al Davis' right hand, we would always meet down at Luigi's, which sadly is closed now in Alameda. Great linguine. Oh my Lord. Oh, all right. Oh. Anyway, the Raiders wanted me to represent them and present the NFL with a case of bringing back the 49er Raider preseason game. This was in 1996. All right. Why? Me? Because the Raiders didn't want it to make it they didn't want it to look like it came from them. Long story short, went down, met with Mr. D, Eddie DeBartolo. Talked with Steve Mariucci, who I had met before, his Cal coach, football. Got it done. During that, at Linguini's, Local South said to me, there's a guy that I want you to meet. I'm going to give you the number to call him. They're grooming him for commissioner. His name is Roger Goodell. He's the executive vice president for football operations. So it just so happened I had a book on American politics and history. It wasn't the title, it was something else. But I happened to read about a guy named Charles Goodell. Charles Goodell was famously known as the only Republican to vote against the Vietnam War in Congress. That man was Roger Goodell's son. And so by the time I talked to Roger, which was June 14th of 1996, we spent 30 minutes talking with Roger about Roger's dad. That's how I met Roger Goodell. The NFL is a great institution. All right, folks. You got enough of me. Oh, thanks. Says, well said. Thank you. And Oklahoma County politicians are corrupt. Some, not all. We'll talk about that too. Hey, thank you all for sticking around. Almost an hour. I only expected to do this for 15 minutes. No wonder my mom's asleep. I put her to sleep. Hey, Ma, I told him I put you to sleep. Thanks, everybody. All right, I'll see you. That ends the stream.